Today I want to talk about light tables, specifically ones like this. They're real thin, they're made out of plexiglass, and you can hook up a USB cable and hit the power button here, and they light up. And they're great for tracing if you want to trace drawings on a piece of paper. But are they any good for animation? That's what I want to talk about today on the Expat Animator. I wish that these light tables were around back about 20 years ago when I was working on Trep. Because as I've said before, I animated that whole project with pencil on paper and scanned all my drawings in. Back then I actually did have an animation desk with a light table underneath it that I would use for tracing my drawings and like a light table with my animations. But when I went traveling to Costa Rica, I couldn't bring that desk. And so what I did was I looked around for some kind of a light box, and there just weren't any available back then. So I had to make my own. And what I did was a friend of mine and I found these emergency lights that would trigger automatically and light up when the power went out. And they were kind of about this size, and they were kind of thick. You know, they had the light inside, and so we bought a couple of those and we rewired them so that we could just turn them on and off with the light switch. And that's what I used as my light table for most of Trep. But if these things were around back then, I would have definitely used this instead. So we know that these are great for tracing your drawings if you need to clean up a drawing, but we're just talking one drawing. But should you use them for animation? And my answer 20 years ago would have been definitely, but you're probably going to need what's like a pegboard strip. And that's actually what I did was I bought a little metal pegboard strip, and you know, they were about 12 inches long or something, and they got the 3 pegs, and you just glue those to your light board. Now you also need a hole punch to punch the holes in your paper so that all the drawings will line up. And then again, you have to scan those in with a scanner and then manipulate them in the computer and color them. Now, I don't recommend that anymore, even with these light tables being available and as cheap as they are, because everything you can just do digitally now, and it doesn't cost that much to get into the digital animation tools, especially with programs like Rough Animator starting at $5. So then you really just need some hardware, and you know, a brand new iPad these days can cost around $300, another $100 for a pencil, and then you're able to work on your own animated projects. But I still like these light tables, and I actually bought a couple of them. I've got this size, and then I've got a bigger one, and you know, I use them occasionally for my drawing projects if I'm drawing something pencil on paper, pen on paper. Or even a few years ago when I was working on Trep, the graphic novel, I drew all 80 pages of that pencil on paper, and then I used a light box that I made to ink those. So there's an actual pencil page and an ink page for each page in that comic book. And again, I created my own light box for that using some store-bought glass that I frosted and put a light underneath it and built a little stand for it. But if these were available back then, even 5 years ago, these are what I would have used to draw that comic book. And today, now that I've got my, my bigger 22-inch XP Pen tablet that I am always using, I probably wouldn't draw my comic book on paper again. I would go the digital route. But I still like drawing on paper, and I think I might even be better at drawing on paper. But I think the inking tools digitally are better than the inking pens that I was using. And maybe that's just because I don't ink that much and I wasn't that good at it. But it brings me back to the question, should you use a light box to animate in 2021 going into 2022? And I would say, unless you really can't afford a digital device, then yeah, go ahead. These things are cheap, they're good, and you can plug them in with any USB wall adapter and a micro USB cable, and you're ready to go. But the speed that you'll be able to animate at will be slower than if you were animating digitally. So keep that in mind if you decide to start your first animated project. So what's the equivalent of these light boxes in your digital animation software? Well, that would be called onion skinning. So you want to use the onion skinning tool And you'll be able to see actually more than one drawing underneath your drawing. But if you still like to draw with pencil and paper, or need to ink a pencil drawing for a project, I would recommend using these light boxes. Just remember, you'll need a scanner to get the artwork into a digital format so you can color it with a program like Photoshop or something else. But let me know how many people out there are still animating traditionally with pencil on paper and scanning their drawings in. I think if you haven't switched over to digital yet, it might be time, because it'll definitely speed up your workflow. Yes, you probably have a little bit of time to learn a 2D animation software package if you haven't used them before, but programs like Rough Animator and some other ones out there are pretty easy to learn, at least to get to the basics so you can get your first animated project done. My name is Patrick Davidson. This has been another episode of the Expat Animator. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. If you found today's video helpful, you might like some of my animation classes over at Skillshare.com. I'll put the link in the description below.